Obi-Wan and Anakin fought alongside Ahsoka at the Siege of Mandalore. In the original story, Anakin and Obi-Wan returned to Coruscant to save the Chancellor from General Grievous's assault. However, on one of our old YouTube videos, Josiah Perdke asked what if instead the pair of them had stayed with Ahsoka to battle Maul. That's a situation that we'll be exploring today, so come along for the ride and let's get right into it. Our story begins when Ahsoka meets with Anakin and Obi-Wan aboard Admiral Wolf Yularen's Republic Venator, attempting to garner further support from the two Jedi in order to regain control of Mandalore from Maul and his crime syndicate. Events transpire in much the same fashion as they do in the Clone Wars, up until the point when Obi-Wan receives a transmission about Palpatine's troubles on the galactic capital. The two Jedi react in much the same fashion as they do in the Clone Wars, telling Ahsoka that they need to return to Coruscant and help the Chancellor. However, in this instance, Ahsoka's frustrated arguments against Obi-Wan playing politics end up hitting harder for the pair of Jedi. Anakin, always being more of a rebellious Jedi, remarks that Mandalore is also important in galactic affairs and that the people deserve just as much aid as the people of Coruscant. He also throws in a snide remark about Satine, which Obi-Wan shoots him a dirty look for. Plus, Anakin was certain that there were enough Jedi and clones around to protect the Chancellor anyways. After some convincing, Obi-Wan finally agrees, though he doesn't necessarily approve of the plan of action. He was a council member, and there were some expectations for him to play their politics. However, Obi-Wan knows that going with Ahsoka would probably be better for the galaxy at large. This simple change alters the timeline significantly. And let's keep going to figure out how. Before arriving on Mandalore, Ahsoka is greeted with the same tribute from the 501st that she was in the Clone Wars. She's quite humbled, pleased to see that the soldiers still respect her, even though she made the decision to leave the Jedi Order. They all still salute her and call her by her old rank of commander. Once a soldier, always a soldier, it seems, for the clones. This display makes Ahsoka even more interested in protecting the lives of her troops in the upcoming battle. Upon arrival on Mandalore, the Republic is greeted with much the same one that they were in the Clone Wars. Prime Minister Almec ends up calling their actions illegal for moving in on a neutral world, which is scolded by all of the Jedi present, along with Admiral Yularen. They say that they know his government is harboring a known galactic criminal, and that this is not an operation that violates their neutrality. Instead, it is one to extract and eliminate a threat to both Mandalore and the galaxy at large. Naturally, Almec disputes these claims, and Mandalore prepares for battle. The Siege of Mandalore itself is significantly quicker than in the actual Clone Wars arc, with the added assistance of Kenobi's 212th Clone Battalion, along with the incredible experience and battle chemistry between Rex and Cody. The Mandalorians are quickly overwhelmed. The presence of two extra Jedi with significant battle experience ends up helping change the tide of the battle, along with the continued barrage of fire from the Night Owls and the Grand Army of the Republic. They fight valiantly, and they end up killing many clone soldiers, just as Mandalorians should, but they can't stand up to the Republic's strike force. Soon, Bo's assembled group retakes the palace and throws Almec in jail, promising to persecute him for his corruption and association with Maul's syndicate after a legitimate government had been restored to Mandalore. While the Republic forces had been able to quickly subdue Maul's, they hadn't been able to find the ex-Sith Lord himself. Clones begin searching the sewers, on the hunt for this chaotic criminal genius. Meanwhile, Obi-Wan, Anakin, Ahsoka, Rex, and Cody end up speaking with the Jedi Council over hologram in order to update them with regards to the Mandalore situation, along with to hear how things are going in the rest of the galaxy. The Council is agitated by the fact that Obi-Wan and Anakin disobeyed their direct orders to return to Coruscant, but it seemed that things worked out well for them in the end. Mace Windu and Yoda ended up being the ones to take on Dooku instead, and they defeated him, still cutting off both of his hands, but instead taking him prisoner. They also recovered the Chancellor. However, they were growing wary of the Chancellor's true intentions. After capturing Dooku, the Separatist figurehead had told them that Palpatine was manipulating everything behind the scenes, orchestrating the entire conflict in order to secure more control over the galaxy. The Jedi believed that this was just some wacky story that Dooku had fabricated to throw them off his trail, but they had sensed no deception in him. Dooku was in a maximum security Republic jail awaiting trial. Obi-Wan strokes his beard, remembering that Dooku had told him a similar tale on Geonosis before the Clone Wars. He tells the Jedi to be wary, and that all will be revealed in time. Windu remarks that he was on his way to deal with Grievous, and after the Separatist general was defeated, the pieces would fall into place. Soon, the truth would come out. Shortly after this call, Captain Vaughn gives a shout to the Jedi. He informs them that the 501st and 212th have discovered the whereabouts of Maul, along with a few more of his top Mandalorian leaders. He informs the Jedi that they will be pursuing them into the sewers of Mandalore, and Ahsoka tells him to wait for the Jedi to arrive. Bo-Katan ensures that she can hold the palace on her own, so Ahsoka, Obi-Wan, and Anakin leave to confront Maul. Upon arriving at the sewers, the trio and the clones begin their hunt. They scour the underbelly of Sundari, searching for the devil that had caused so much chaos in the galaxy. Eventually, Maul reveals himself at a checkpoint in the tunnels, cutting off the trio from most of their clones. He throws his double-ended saber into a section of 501st troopers, killing them all in one fell swoop. The remaining Mandalorians, including Gar Saxon and Ursa Wren, jump in to chase the clones away from the Jedi and Ahsoka. Maul then rushes towards Ahsoka, Anakin, and Obi-Wan, cackling maniacally. He's especially angry at Obi-Wan, and he also is happy that Anakin showed up so that he can tell him about the plan. After all of these years, his plan was finally beginning to pay off. Anakin was the key to Palpatine's plan, and Maul wanted to kill Kenobi after he had inflicted so much pain on him by murdering Satine in cold blood. Ahsoka didn't need to be there, but she could be a fine addition to his team, if he would be able to seduce her to the dark side. Maul taunts the Jedi as their sabers swing, telling them about his visions, the master plan, and how they were all just pawns in a greater game. Soon, a new galactic order would rise, Maul claimed, and there would be nothing that the Jedi could do to stop it. The era of Jedi dominance was coming to an end. Anakin calls Maul a liar before lunging towards him, using his lightsaber prowess to try and knock the Zabrak off guard. Maul mentions that he can feel Anakin's rage, and that he's a worthy opponent. He also says that he now understands why Darth Sidious chose Anakin to groom into his next apprentice, sensing his unmatched potential. Maul says that Anakin could join him, along with Ahsoka, and together they could depose of Sidious and put an end to his dark plan for the galaxy. Of course, Maul doesn't include Obi-Wan in this, because he wants to see Obi-Wan dead. Anakin snarls in response, leaning into his darker emotions. After this fight continues for a few minutes, the clones continuing to battle the ferocious Mandalorians, Maul is overwhelmed by Anakin, Ahsoka, and Obi-Wan. They place him in handcuffs, and Maul reaches out in the Force to try and choke Kenobi one last time. As soon as Anakin sees that Maul is doing this, he takes out his lightsaber and bonks Maul over the head with the hilt, knocking him unconscious. After this, Obi-Wan stays to guard Maul, and Ahsoka goes with Anakin to aid the clones in their fight. By the time that the pair arrived, the Mandalorians had almost been subdued, but there were a few pesky ones still putting up a fight. In the end, the Mandalorians acknowledge their defeat, and the remaining ones surrender to the clones, knowing that they've put on a display that will be commemorated in the songs years from now. Much like in the Clone Wars, Bo-Katan and the Night Owls gift the Republic with the old holding cell for Maul designed specifically for pesky Force users. Bo takes the leadership of Mandalore, vowing to clean up the corruption caused by Maul and Almec, before sending off the Jedi on good terms. The Darksabers also gifted to her by Obi-Wan after the defeat of Maul, who drops it inside of the sewer. Anakin and Ahsoka thank Bo for her bravery, and Obi-Wan has an emotional conversation with Bo about how Satine would be proud of her after giving her the Darksaber. Bo remarks that she wouldn't be too sure, as her sister wouldn't have ever wanted to see war come to her planet. Obi-Wan nods his head, remembering how she had been the bravest, most morally convicted person that he had ever met. Then, the Jedi, Ahsoka, and the clones leave Mandalore and leave Bo-Katan to govern. After this, she ends up persecuting Almec to the fullest extent of the law and executing him for treason against Mandalore. She also ends up getting past the curse of the Darksaber, and so she rules Mandalore and is well respected by the people going forward. On the way back to Coruscant, something feels off. There are ebbs in the Force that make the trio anxious, and it seems to impact all of them equally. As their Venator moves through hyperspace, the Jedi receive another call from Mace Windu and Yoda detailing the defeat of General Grievous on Utapau. They're both pleased. The Separatists were crippled with the loss of both of their head military general and their political figurehead. However, despite this, Separatist sentiments still remain strong. Their parliament refuses to surrender, as does the corporate council, who's profiting from the war. Newt Gunray, who would become another one of the influential Separatist thinkers during the Clone Wars, is elected to be the new head of the Separatist parliament. Because Anakin is not present on Coruscant for Palpatine to continue manipulating, he must change his plan slightly. Instead of gathering all of the Separatist leaders on Mustafar to have them executed by Anakin, he continues to allow them to publicly work in their war effort. This allows him to continue to slowly consolidate power within the Senate and maintain the popular support as a wartime leader within the Republic. The Jedi, however, are a different story. Palpatine demonizes their handling of many key battles in a lot of his speeches late in the war, stating that one of his gravest mistakes was letting a religious order command troops into battle. While some individual commanders had been tactical, many of them hadn't understood the art of warfare and would have been clueless without their clones to advise them. This stirs public discontentment with the Jedi, meaning that when he eventually makes them into criminals, the galaxy would be more receptive to their demise. He also makes it so that Dooku reveals to the galaxy that he's a Sith Lord. Many of Palpatine's supporters wouldn't even care. They're just happy that they have a strong leader to get them through the conflict. After Obi-Wan tells Mace about Maul's strange remarks during their battle, Mace Windu says that he will go to the Chancellor's office and inform him of the victory, along with bringing up the rumors that both Maul and Dooku express about Palpatine being a Sith Lord. Soon, the 501st and 212th forces arrive back on Coruscant. Ahsoka, Admiral Yularen, and the Jedi generals exit the Venator and are immediately met by Admiral Tarkin, who takes Maul into custody and updates the crew on what has happened on the planet since they had last spoken to Mace Windu. He informs them that shortly, the Chancellor will be giving an emergency address to the Senate regarding the state of the war, and he recommends that they all attend. Ahsoka is still incredibly apprehensive around Tarkin after his false persecution of her, and she says that she'd rather attend to her own business than get involved in the politics of the war. Tarkin stares her down, delivering the line, "If you wish, citizen," before turning around on his heels and walking with Maul into the Coruscant military base of operations. Ahsoka parts ways with the Jedi, indicating that her job was done and that she couldn't stand to deal with the politicians at this point. While it would have been nice to see her old friends from the Order, she also knows that going back would mean many dirty looks from people who frowned upon her decision to leave, such as Tarkin, and many other older Jedi. She tells them that she'll be there for them if they ever need her, and she gives them a channel to contact her on. Anakin and Obi-Wan say that they understand, and Ahsoka hugs them both before walking away from the military complex. Yularen says that they should get to the Senate chambers quickly, so he and the Jedi hop on a gunship headed in that direction. Upon their arrival at the Senate building, Palpatine's speech is already in session. The trio hop out of the gunship, thank the clones, and head inside the chambers. When they arrive, they're greeted by the raucous applause from most of the senators, and they hear Palpatine giving a speech about how Mace Windu tried to take his life in an attempted Jedi coup against him. Palpatine says that he was only able to survive due to the quick thinking of clone guards that had been present nearby and who had heard the commotion in his office. Order 66 is not required in this timeline, as Palpatine's goal is to instead shift the public perception against the Jedi first, rather than just outright killing them. If he had just killed them right off the bat, people would have definitely been more hesitant to accept his explanation of why. Even his die-hard supporters, who weren't necessarily in favor of a genocide, only the fact that the Jedi shouldn't have been military commanders. This way, he could look like he was being merciful. He continues to rail against the Jedi, saying that they never should have been given any authority in the war, and that they had been too high on their perceived political influence for the galaxy's good. Palpatine, however, also states that he would be merciful to all of the Jedi who pledge allegiance specifically to him and to his republic. He also says that he will continue to fight this war against the Separatists, who continue to rage on in their war efforts. To that end, Palpatine discredits Dooku, who he states will say anything to smear him, including the outlandish conspiracy theory that Palpatine had orchestrated this silly war and was somehow a Sith Lord. He also discredits the newly captured Maul, stating that the words of a petulant crime boss could not be trusted. Palpatine repeats that he loves democracy and he loves the Republic, passionately articulating that he will maintain his emergency powers as the Separatists continue to harm his people. As this speech plays out, Yularen gives Obi-Wan and Anakin a sharp glance filled with suspicion. The two try and tell him that they aren't traitors, that Palpatine has twisted the truth. Yularen asks if that means they're going to swear allegiance to the Republic and to Palpatine. To Anakin and Obi-Wan, it is quite clear that Palpatine is a Sith Lord, especially after the intel from Dooku that seemed to line up with Maul's statements. Yularen told them that if they didn't swear allegiance to Palpatine immediately, he would be forced to arrest them. Anakin is angered by Palpatine's betrayal of his trust, and he taps into some of his darker emotions. He force chokes Yularen in a moment of hot-headedness, to which Obi-Wan yells at him to stop. Anakin force pushes Yularen backwards, knocking him into a nearby wall, unconscious. Many senators see this outburst and use it to validate Palpatine's accusations against the Jedi Order. Anakin and Obi-Wan are able to escape the Senate building while being pursued by a large contingent of Coruscant guards. making their way into hiding on the lower levels of the Ecumenopolis and managing to shake off their pursuers in the large crowds who live down there. The pair, not knowing what else to do, use a secure channel that Ahsoka had given them earlier. She tells them to meet her at a garage in the lower levels, and she gives them coordinates. This is the place where Trace and Rafa Martez were based in the Clone Wars, but luckily for us, they're not present in this story. Yoda also contacts Obi-Wan after his clone troopers had tried to arrest him for not remaining loyal to Palpatine, and he knew that many of the other council members had either already been killed or arrested by their troops, who actually believed Palpatine's narrative. Again, Order 66 wasn't necessary in this timeline because many people believe what Palpatine had to say. Ahsoka gives Yoda the coordinates to the garage and tells him to meet her there, where the 4 Jedi could formulate a plan. During this time, Anakin reaches out to Captain Rex. He asks Rex if he really believes all of this, especially after the Fives conspiracy that he had recently witnessed. Rex says that now he knows for certain that Palpatine wasn't who he said he was. In actuality, Rex is quite upset. He'd watched his friend die just so that one man could further his influence in the galaxy. Rex knows that many of his men feel uncomfortable with Palpatine's recent edict, and that they're also not fond of him consolidating further emergency powers to win a war. Anakin advises that Rex contact Padme, who he knows sympathizes with the Jedi's plight, just by intuition, so that she can help reveal this knowledge to the galaxy. Rex agrees, signing off. Yoda arrives within a few days. Anakin informs the group what he told Rex, and they all agree with his judgment. The 4 of them also believe that confronting Palpatine together would be prudent, as they have to have more of a chance of taking him on directly. Their plan is for Obi-Wan and Anakin to walk into the Senate building posing as clones with help from Rex, who promises to meet the group of Jedi at the Martez garage and give them the necessary supplies. Anakin is one of the public enemy number 1s because his face is plastered everywhere after his experience with Yularen, a respected Republic general. It is important that he be disguised. Ahsoka and Yoda would pose as prisoners, whom Rex would state were ordered to go directly to the Chancellor due to Yoda's high-profile status as the Grand Master of the Jedi Order, and Ahsoka's unique status as somebody who had left the Jedi Order but was still a prominent Force user. After a few days, everything is worked out and the group is ready to go. Rex informs him, as he brings the equipment and prepares for this plan to be carried out, that while they're confronting the Chancellor, he will be testifying with Padme in the Senate, dealing with Palpatine's corruption. It was go time.
Hey folks, if you're enjoying this story, please consider subscribing and turning on notifications as we update this channel weekly with new What If content. Now, back to the story.
Now, dear viewers, the moment that you've all been waiting for. The moment that will either make or break Sidious's rise to power. The confrontation between him, the 3 Jedi, and Ahsoka Tano. The ruse works. Rex manages to convince the Coruscant guards that he was under direct orders to bring these 2 to the Chancellor's office. Anakin and Obi-Wan remain silent, bearing the blue markings of the 501st Legion on their armor. Being a well-respected veteran leader, Rex isn't even questioned. The clones allow him to pass. Rex escorts the group all the way to Palpatine's office before they part ways, wishing the group luck as he heads off to find Padme in the Senate. Obi-Wan pushes a button on the door, still in his clone armor. At the desk sits Palpatine, still looking young and fresh after his battle with Mace Windu. In this timeline, we're going with the interpretation that Palpatine held back in his battle with Mace so that he could deceive Anakin. With Anakin not there, Palpatine would have never gotten to the point that he was shocking himself with lightning in the corner. He still looks like the old, benevolent grandfather that the galaxy had come to know over the past decade and a half. One thing about him had changed, though. Now, he wore more vibrant red robes, akin to the ones that he had adorned during his infamous speech in Revenge of the Sith. Many in the galaxy would think that this was merely a fashion statement. However, the Jedi recognized those robes from days long past. They were the old formal robes of the Sith. Palpatine cackles, sensing the presence of the Jedi underneath the clone armor. He knows that this is just some elaborate plot to attack him again, and he welcomes it. Anakin and Obi-Wan take off the clone helmets and ignite their lightsabers, ready for battle. The shackles on Yoda and Ahsoka fall to the floor with a push of a button from Anakin, and they also prepare for battle. Palpatine's blue Coruscant guards enter the room in the corner, yet been replaced by the red of the Empire. This time, Yoda doesn't dispatch of them quickly. Instead, they end up joining the fight. The contingent still disposes of them quite easily, but at least they put up a little bit more of a battle. Palpatine looks at each of them, giving them one last chance to join him, but they each refuse. Palpatine looks directly at Anakin, telling him that he knows that something bad is about to happen to the one he loves in the near future, and that if he joins the dark side, Palpatine can help Anakin learn the secrets of eternal life to save that person. Anakin simply stares his former mentor down, feeling the dark side emotions boil through his veins, stating that he'll never join Palpatine, especially now that he'd been lied to for years by somebody that he had trusted. Palpatine smirks, uttering the "It's treason then" line before igniting his lightsaber and battling the Jedi, plus Ahsoka. All of them are incredibly experienced in swordsmanship, so they're each formidable opponents for the Sith Lord, taking him on 4-on-1, unlike Yoda's showdown in Revenge of the Sith with Palpatine. Soon, Palpatine grows tired of playing around, and he unleashes a barrage of Force lightning upon the Jedi. Yoda is able to contain it with the Force, while the others struggle to back it with their lightsabers. Palpatine laughs maniacally, doubling down on his barrage. Sadly, Ahsoka's twin sabers don't have the same impact that Rey's do in The Rise of Skywalker, and she still struggles against this blast. As Palpatine continues against this onslaught from the Jedi, a hologram of Tarkin pops up on his desk. For once, the esteemed officer seems incredibly out of sorts, rattled, and screaming that there had been a prison break conducted by separatist sympathizers who'd been working at the jail. They'd been bringing food to Dooku in the lower levels of the establishment, and they had the codes to open his door and break him free. So, they did. During this commotion, Dooku also decided to free Maul, who he used as a distraction like Ahsoka did in the Clone Wars to help cover up his escape. Now, it seemed that both of them had made their way to the Senate building with the separatist sympathizers, who had put clone armor on and pretended to chase them through the city streets. Sidious's past was catching up with him, it seemed. For a moment, Sidious was flustered, breaking in his lightning attack. Then, however, his anger is rejuvenated at double the strength it was before. Meanwhile, in the Senate chambers, it's time for Padme to give her address. She comes forward with Rex, introducing him as a witness to the total corruption of Palpatine and how he's been manipulating the conflict from the beginning. Rex begins to share his story, and many senators have mixed reactions. He tells them about Fives, the inhibitor chips, and how the recent actions of Palpatine's administration had convinced him that something wasn't right. While he may have just been a clone, he could see when things were amiss, and that his Jedi generals had always taught him to do the right thing. As he concluded, many senators applauded, but others scorned him. They told him that he had no proof, and that this was just another political stunt by Padme during wartime to try and get her peace agenda passed. Some even moved for her to be removed from the Senate chambers due to defamatory remarks made against the head of state. However, during this bickering, Dooku bursts through one of the doorways and begins to make a fuss. His hands have been replaced with mechanical ones, and he yells for the entire chamber to hear. He claims that he would have testified earlier, but Palpatine had censored him and locked him away before he had the chance to. Dooku requests that the nearest delegation allow him to use their pod, and they agree, curious about what he has to say in a morbid way. Dooku claims that Palpatine threw him in solitary confinement far away from everyone else, and then defamed him to the masses, fearing the endless droves of proof that he could dig up from hushed records at the palace on Sereno. While Dooku didn't like the Republic, he had also been betrayed by Palpatine, and he didn't wish to see the entire galaxy fall to a similar fate. Dooku promises that if the Republic gives him more time, he could provide them with the evidence that backs the claims of Rex and verifies his story. Many senators are hesitant, especially after Palpatine had told them that Dooku was a liar and a manipulator who would say anything to turn the people against him. Padme is hesitant to listen as well, but it seems to line up with the story that Rex had given her. Screaming begins to engulf the Senate, and many begin to heckle Dooku. Mas Amedda orders the Senate to return to respectful conduct, but nobody seems interested in listening to him. Meanwhile, just underneath the Senate chambers in Palpatine's office, the Jedi continue to battle ferociously. Yoda pushes back lightning towards Palpatine, but he manages to absorb it himself. Anakin uses his anger to push him forward, prompting Palpatine to remark that he can sense Skywalker's dark emotions coming out. He goads the Jedi towards killing him, allowing himself to be overcome with passion. Ahsoka and Obi-Wan continue to defend themselves against Palpatine's force attacks, but they're beginning to falter. However, the battle of the balance changes when another presence in the Force nears. It's Maul, sprinting into the room with death in his eyes. Maul unleashes a guttural war cry, blasting Sidious backwards with an unexpected blast of Force energy. Sidious cries out, slamming into the wall behind him, his stream of lightning being interrupted. Obi-Wan and Ahsoka lower their guards, taking a moment to catch their breath. Yoda waits with them, waiting to see what Sidious would do next, as it was not the Jedi way to kill an unarmed opponent. Anakin and Maul, however, rush towards the Master Manipulator Sith, each prepared to demolish him for how he treated them. Maul never thought that he'd be able to get this opportunity, but now he was pleased. Kenobi and Sidious in the same room? Oh, revenge was sweet. It was the way of the Sith, after all. Anakin holds his saber high, prepared to execute Palpatine, who continues to encourage him to follow through. The Jedi behind him yell not to, that Palpatine must stand before the Senate on account for his actions. Anakin breathes heavily, feeling all of his emotions begin to bubble over. However, before he's able to do anything, Maul reaches out his hands and begins to force choke Palpatine. Palpatine is surprised, as he had not foreseen this development occurring. Instinctively, he retaliates with a brief shot of Force lightning, which ends up overloading Maul's mechanical legs and causing him immense pain. Maul falls to the floor, and while Sidious is distracted, Anakin cuts off Palpatine's hands, causing the Sith Lord to cry out in pain. Anakin places his saber to Sidious's throat, ordering the Sith Lord to surrender. The other Jedi surround Palpatine as well, coming to assist Anakin, who decides not to kill Palpatine. Maul cries that they're all fools, that they should get rid of this menace once and for all. Obi-Wan, ironically, remarks that they were not like him, consumed by rage and hatred. Instead, the Jedi stood by their morals, along with Ahsoka. Maul says that those morals are what got them into this predicament in the first place. Anakin bonks Palpatine over the head with the hilt of his lightsaber, knocking the Sith unconscious. In this moment, a stream of clones enter the room, demanding to know what has happened. The Jedi tell them, dropping their weapons. They comply with the wishes of the clones, and they end up getting arrested, as per orders. However, so does Palpatine. It seemed that after Dooku's bombshell, Republic intelligence officials had dug into some of the documents on Sereno that Dooku had kept, and they found many inconsistencies, including plenty of hushed payments and communications with prominent figures on Coruscant, the Kaminoans, and plenty of supposedly neutral corporations. While nothing had been found specifically implicating the Chancellor, the Republic Intelligence Agency deems that it would be prudent to detain Palpatine while they sift through the information. Maul is taken to medbay to have his injuries healed. Ahsoka, Anakin, Obi-Wan, and Yoda are all placed in Republic prison for temporary holding while this strange situation is being investigated further. They find many of their Jedi colleagues nearby, and they end up discussing what has transpired. All are pleased to hear the truth about Palpatine seems to have come out. Maul is placed in deep confinement, as is Dooku once again, until they need him to testify more against the Chancellor, which Maul refuses to do because he hates the Republic and hates the Jedi just as much as he hates Sidious. Palpatine is placed on house arrest, and he has a medical droid assist him with the new mechanical hands that he receives. Palpatine's greatest strength, his ability to use Force lightning, was now significantly diminished, putting the Sith Lord in ill spirits. However, there were always other dark side powers that he could use, and he trains with them during his period of solitude. Following this event, Anakin confides in Yoda, Obi-Wan, and Ahsoka about his relationship with Padme, due to Palpatine's obscure remarks about somebody that Anakin loved dying. They're not surprised, but they argue that this is grounds for him to be released from the Order. Anakin says that honestly, he believes it would be best for him to leave voluntarily, like Ahsoka had. He doesn't feel like he fits in, and he still has the same qualms with the Jedi teachings that he did before the Siege of Mandalore. Anakin also wants the chance to raise his children when they're born. Yoda agrees, and he says that Anakin will be permitted to leave amicably upon their release from jail, which they anticipate to be inevitable. Anakin is permitted by the Republic to leave prison for the birth of his children under supervision, and he tells Padme of how proud he is of her for being so strong in the face of public backlash against her support of Rex in the initial phases. Padme says that she feels the same about Anakin, who stood by his morals and who managed to survive Palpatine's manipulation. How do these events impact the end of our story? Let's find out and see. Mon Mothma is elected to be the intern chancellor, and she heads the inquiry into Palpatine's leadership that led the Republic to this place. She is much more willing to compromise with the Separatists as a pacifist, and reaches a peace agreement with them. Many Republic ultra-nationalists grumble about this, but most are happy that the war has come to an end. Dooku is still held in Republic custody, but he's moved to a more comfortable prison. Maul, however, remains chained to his solitary confinement. He's forgotten about again, and he's left to brood about his frustrations with the Jedi, especially Kenobi. Speaking of Kenobi, Obi-Wan and Bo-Katan maintain a solid relationship following the events of Mandalore. Obviously nothing romantic, because Obi-Wan was involved with her sister, and that would be weird. However, Bo-Katan does keep him updated on the status of Mandalore, which remains a neutral system, and also tells him about the prosecution of Almec, who has been tried for treason against Mandalore, and he was executed publicly for his crimes. In this timeline, the Empire never comes to rise, so Bo-Katan remains the ruler of Mandalore, and she is well liked by her people. She may have received the Darksaber on a technicality from somebody else, but she still wielded it with prowess, and the people respected her judgment. As more evidence is released about the Chancellor's collaboration with the Separatists and the Inhibitor chip orders, thank goodness Order 66 was never activated, the Chancellor is placed under arrest. He is eventually charged and convicted with a multitude of crimes, too numerous to name in this video. His supporters are frustrated, and they protest heavily, but it does no good. Palpatine is placed near to Maul, deep in the bowels of a Republic jail. The Jedi are acquitted for their crimes, and the Order holds ceremonies for all who were lost in action. Many clones express remorse, and most Jedi state that they can't blame them for what happened. Yularen directly says sorry to Obi-Wan and Anakin, who forgive him as well. And Anakin apologizes for force-choking Yularen. He still remains friends with these two post-war. Rex is treated as a hero and a poster boy for Mon Mothma's new government. He doesn't always like the political games, but he's willing to play along with them in order to serve the Republic in any way possible. Anakin leaves the Order as promised, and he helps raise his children on Naboo with Padme, teaching them the ways of the Force with some help from Ahsoka, who pops by every so often on her travels across the galaxy. Obi-Wan and Yoda also visit Anakin, staying in touch with him despite his departure from the Order. Padme continues to diligently complete her duties in the Senate. Peace seems to have dawned on the galaxy, and things appear to be going more smoothly. However, deep in that Republic jail, Maul can feel Palpatine's presence nearby. Palpatine reaches out to his former apprentice, and each of them knows that the dark side must return to the galaxy, even if the two despise one another. Their mutual hatred for the Jedi was palpable in the waves of the Force, and each of them knew that one day they would have to team up to destroy everything that the Jedi and the Republic had built. For now, however, patience was their greatest weapon. Eventually, they would escape, and when they did, the galaxy would feel their wrath. Hey there folks, thanks for tuning in to another Bantha Stew's What If scenario. I hope that you enjoyed it. If you did, please consider checking out this video, What If Darth Vader Ruled Tatooine? Cheers folks, have a great day, and I hope that you get your daily dose of Bantha Stew.